Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Your Excellencies, esteemed guests, and viewers, welcome. Thank you for joining us today to share knowledge, insight, and elaborate on the obstacles constraining global economic recovery. Collaboration is an integral part of human development, and we are here today humbly offering an opportunity for engagement with diverse stakeholders to elaborate and explain the concerns puzzling the global economic community. With your participation, we will engage in meaningful and fruitful discussion. We are pleased to have with us today Dr. Jamal Kibbi, representative of the World Bank in the United Arab Emirates, and expert of Middle East policy implementation, formulation, and economic management. And of course, Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin, author, professor, and current Senior Vice President of the World Bank's 2030 Development Agenda. Considering the extraordinary circumstances brought about by the pandemic, related stressors still remain as key risks on the road to healthy and sustainable economic growth. I am Rawa Hatem Al-Tuhami, and I am happy to be representing the Saudi Ministry of Economy and Planning. It is with great pleasure that we kick off the MEP Economic Dialogue. We will now hand it over to Dr. Jamal Kibbi. Dr. Kibbi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the Ministry of Economy and Planning of Saudi Arabia for hosting and facilitating this discussion. I'm honored to present Maali al-Wazir Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin, who is a researcher and intellectual at heart. He has well-demonstrated accomplishments in policy formulation and implementation in his country. He was the managing director of the World Bank. He is currently the executive director of the IMF, representing the Arab countries, and he continues to be the special representative of the United Nations Secretary General for the MDGs, and he was also involved in the SDGs. We are honored to have Dr. Muhyiddin with us. Dr. Muhyiddin, we hope you kindly start your presentation addressing the issues of that time in macroeconomic policy formulation and implementation, with the issues arising these days, the debt problem facing a lot of developing and industrial countries, growth, inflation, and other key developments in this domain. The floor is yours, Maali al-Wazir.
All right, so I was just trying to thank Dr. Jamal for his kind introduction. And of course, I'm very much honored for the kind invitation by the Ministry of the Economy and Planning of Saudi Arabia. I really have a great admiration to what the ministry is doing. Just a few days ago, we were in good discussion on the priorities with the kind of global developments facing us today. Have a presentation that I like to share. I wonder if Dr. Jamal and colleagues can help sharing it and uploading it on the system. That would be great. All right, okay. Until you do that, then. So let me just share with you some quick reflections on what's happening in the global economy. The story so far is a story of divergence and discrepancy because of the pandemic. And we have seen the growth rate figures of the advanced economies, emerging markets, and the LDCs, or the less developed countries, taking different paths and different directions because of the different response to the pandemic. We have seen the public spending by advanced economies, in some cases exceeding 25%, while in the middle-income countries, that figure had been ranging between 5 and 8%, in some cases it reached 10%, but it's much lower than the advanced economies. Then when you check what happened at the low-income countries, you can really see close to 1% or lower than 2% of public spending to GDP. Meanwhile, the vaccination was as well and has been. So, yeah, it's one of the issues of access and challenges of technology you are suffering from. What I was saying, that the discrepancy, again, that you can consider another aspect of discrepancy, this issue of digital connectivity. But we have an issue as well with vaccination, less than 40% so far in middle-income countries, but much more than that in the advanced economies. Low-income countries have been suffering from lack of vaccination, less than 5%. So just wishing to have this presentation shared with you. If you had it with you, you will see that the path towards recovery for what were there before the pandemic in 2019, you would expect that to be very much different from the low-income countries to the middle-income countries to the advanced economies, with the expectations of the advanced economies going back on track sooner. You see, for instance, in the United States, this year is expected to be 6%. Europe, around 5%. Middle East and North Africa, around 4%. But the low-income countries are even lower than that. So when you are expecting the recovery to be back fast, here we'll be very much facing the following. We'll be seeing a kind of a V-shaped curve of recovery for advanced economies, a U-shaped in middle-income countries and emerging markets, and then an L-shaped in the low-income countries. If you get the total out of that, you can see a kind of a K-shaped recovery. This means that some countries are going to be doing better and some countries are going to be seeing major decline. It depends where you are. If you are an advanced economy, you are doing much better. But this is not the end of the story. It's not just about growth. There are issues here related to debt, accumulation of debt. We are confronting the fourth wave of accumulation of debt worldwide, by public debt exceeding 100% of GDP. And actually, the household sector had been borrowing heavily, and the non-bank firms and the non-financial corporations have been borrowing as well heavily. So this is a fourth wave of debt. You may remember from the recent history that each one of the previous waves ended with a crisis. You may recall the first wave with Latin American countries suffering from.
This is an unfortunate interruption. We're just talking about the.
I'm back again, Dr. Jamal.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Tfaddal.
Yeah, so we ended with this issue of the challenge with the debt. And I was saying that we are confronting the fourth wave of debt. And we hope that this wave does not end like the three other waves ended with. The Latin American debt wave back in the 70s, the emerging markets crisis of the 90s, and the mortgage finance crisis back in 2008. So we need really to be careful in dealing with this accumulation of debt and have the precautionary measures. So I like to end just by two things here and waiting for your questions. One is related to inflation. And the inflation is basically about the mismatch between the demand and supply. Demand recovered faster, but the supply, because of the supply chain disruptions, didn't catch up with the demand. What we're seeing is unprecedented inflation in many of the advanced economies. And despite the growth in some of the advanced economies like the US, if you followed the recent poll that had been done in the case of the US by Washington Post and ABC, it showed that 70% of those who have been surveyed are unhappy and have negative perception of the economy, with 40% saying that the economy is doing poor. Then you have, at the same time, the interest rates, the real interest rates in advanced economies is not really positive at all. It's significantly negative. So here, in the policy design and the economic policy design, you need really to ensure, while we have these kind of inflationary pressures, increase of commodity prices, and then growth is being uneven, and the whole global economy is very much uncertain. And if you were like me in Glasgow, you would have really felt that this kind of a feeling of uncertainty about in the immediate future when it comes to the economic recovery, and the future when you are putting into consideration issues related to global warming in your system of policy measures. So what we need from now is basically for the countries pursuing, as they should, the Sustainable Development Goals. We need major investments in human capital, education, skills. We need major investments in infrastructure, which can help really in the recovery, and we need investments in resilience. Back to you, Dr. Jamal, and let's enjoy this connection while it lasts.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We'll make the best out of it. Let me start by following up on your last comment.
Dr. Jamal?
You have in Glasgow last week. You were in Glasgow last week. What are your impressions about the relevance of the agreement? How feasible is it for developing countries to deal with it? And can we think of a sustainable pathway for increasing investments in infrastructure that are consistent with the new agreements on climate change? Your Excellency.
Let me just tell you, the summary of Glasgow in words. It's as mentioned by the president of the conference, Minister Sharma, that it's basically a very fragile win. Very fragile win. So there were some achievements, but not really as good as it was hoped for, but not really bad based on the expectations. So the expectations were much worse, the hopes were much higher, but what we reach is something in between the expectations and the hopes. For now, we have better targets. You remember in Paris Agreement, there was a 2 degrees target. Now the aim is for 1.5. For the first time, we have coal being mentioned in the text. For the first time, we have agreement on phasing out inefficient subsidies for fossil fuel. For the first time, we have more focus on investments for adaptation and to put it on par with mitigation. That is in a kind of an agreement, not as an academic recommendation. And then we have as well some good deals, including a good example for Africa. As you know, this year, 2022, 2021, 2022, the COP is going to be hosted in Sharm el-Sheikh, the next COP28. So a good example from Africa is coming from South Africa, when they managed to reach a deal by the Just Transition Partnership to get more than $6 billion of investments to help them in their path towards new energy, clean energy. So there are some good examples of good progress. At the same time, I would say that there have been an agreement that this kind of messy situation and greenwashing needs to end. We need to agree on a metric. We need to agree on some sort of good criteria on measuring our progress and to avoid what's so-called greenwashing.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Rawa, do you have a question for Dr. Muhyiddin?
Yes, actually, you might have not spoken about this topic a lot, but what is your opinion on how policymakers should go about unwinding the measures that were set in place, or the fiscal measures that were set in place at the peak time of the pandemic? I see that a lot of governments or a lot of Ministry of Finances are having a hard time unwinding or taking back, for example, the tax breaks, extra loans, and such.
Yes, actually, this is the main challenge, and this is very much country-specific. So each country needs to test which path they are on. If it is V-shaped recovery, they can really start phasing out their fiscal stimulus. If they are still in need for support for their workers, definitely everyone now needs to see more investments in the social protection systems in different countries. What we need to see as well is more support to women and for those who are in schools in different education levels, for supporting the skills. You may have followed the discussion about the infrastructure bill in the United States and the big interest as well in another bill on social protection. This is despite the fact that they're already getting high growth, higher than the emerging markets. So it could be premature in many developing economies and emerging markets to phase out fast while the recovery is not fully there. We are still in the middle of the pandemic. It's not out yet. We still see some European countries and some advanced economies are looking down again, partially or fully, their countries, balancing the concerns about the recession and not to have a full recovery with the inflationary fears. So we need really to have good coordination between the monetary and fiscal policies while you are doing this kind of phasing out, phasing in, trying to get growth back on track, trying to get employment on track, and to manage the market expectations when it comes to inflation and inflationary fears. But as we have seen, inflation this time is not coming from the monetary side necessarily in all countries. It comes as well from some supply side major disruptions. So major investments are required on that front as well. So policymakers are demanded to do more than ever before in order to get us out from this kind of big concern on the growth front and inflation front.
Yes, thank you. The development goals, you are the special envoy of the United Nations Secretary General on this issue, among a lot of other duties and responsibilities you have. What is the strategic direction for developing countries to try to cope with those targets for the next 10 years to be achieved or targeted for 2030?
Yes, I spoke briefly about what happened in Glasgow. Climate change and climate action is just one of the 17 goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's only one of those important goals that would help us to achieve Vision 2030 around the world. So what we need really to put here is put in the context of development and finance, an integrated financial framework that could help us achieving the climate action goals, and at the same time dealing with the requirements to deal with poverty, enhance education and health services, improve our infrastructure, and provide jobs, especially for the youth. What is the solution for that? Is invest, invest, invest. Invest in human capital, invest in infrastructure, including technological solutions, and invest in resilience. And that should be all done in good alignment with climate action. So the Paris Agreement needs to go fully aligned with what is required for the SDGs. There should be no contradiction. But at the same time, my worry, Dr. Jamal Al-Rawa, and of course, the honorable audience and the ladies and gentlemen have been patient with us in this connection difficulties. My worry is to assume that just one goal and investing in it will do the whole thing. We need really to do everything in full alignment with the priorities of the 2030 agenda, not to make one goal on one target hijack the rest of the goals. That will not really be even good for that goal itself. You cannot solve the catastrophe in the climate by creating crises in the labor market or adding problems to poverty or compromising the education or health services.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is indeed a challenge. Balanced, coherent growth on all fronts is absolutely needed. And it's obvious from your discussion and from the issues you raised that policymakers will have quite a challenge in balancing growth, employment, managing inflationary expectations, and investing where investment is needed without creating more inflation. So this is going to be an interesting period for policymakers to tailor their response according to their particular situation to all those challenges. I think we'll conclude it here. I'm happy we were able to get over the communication challenge, and let's see if there are final comments from His Excellency, and then the last word is to Rawa.
I actually have a question, if I may. Considering what you've said, Dr. Kibbi, and what you've expressed, Dr. Mahmoud,
raising her hand. Yeah, please go ahead.
So, like you said, it's going to be a very special time. How are we going to balance between historically high public debt and high inflationary pressures? Usually these two don't come together in the same frame. And so having an unnatural recession, how is the boom cycle going to be followed? And how is the high inflation pressures with the high debt going to kind of meet? Are they going to offset each other? Are they going to exacerbate each other? What do you think?
Right. That's a very good question. It's all about balancing the priorities and managing the short term properly and managing the midterm properly and not forgetting the long term while you are doing that. So here you have these kind of contradictions between what you need really to do and invest in growth, in the job market, and at the same time, not to add more oil to the fire of inflation. This can only be resolved in the short term by very good coordination between fiscal measures and monetary policy measures. Meanwhile, you have these kind of changes because of the digital transformation, because of the new requirements of the fourth industrial revolution, because of this kind of uncertain world that we're living in. So what you need to do here, that shouldn't really be contradicting with the growth and recovering back better or recovering forward better, is to do more investments in the skills and the human capital.
Yes, I think His Excellency is talking about the productivity of human capital. Productivity and efficiency of resources is going to be key to help us deal with the current situation we find ourselves in, especially countries that are faced with both debt and inflationary pressures, as Rawa noted. Okay, I think we managed to get some good inputs and thoughts from His Excellency Muhyiddin. Thank you very much for this opportunity to connect again with Saudi Arabia. And the last word is for Rawa. Tfaddali, Rawa.
Well, of course, thank you all for joining us today. And a special thank you to you, Dr. Jamal Kibir and Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin, for your enriching discussion and your knowledge shared. We appreciate your time and the value you've added to the webinar. We hope that you've gained, to the viewers, we hope that you've gained some insight on the current global topics and inquisitiveness to dig deeper and possibly create solutions for some of the issues that exist in the global and domestic economies. Today, we discussed post-pandemic challenges facing decision makers. We also discussed growth divergence worldwide. And finally, how public debt impacts the global economy. Lastly, we at the Ministry of Economy and Planning would like to extend our thanks to your engagement, and we hope to see you again at our next MEP Dialogue event. May we continue to think critically, observe vigilantly, and ask the crucial questions.